On the other side of the table is Andrew Zelman of Scene Magazine. How's it going?
Going well, Craig. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's been a while, probably since I was doing the actual Scene podcast, since you've been on an episode, but we've kind of folded that down a little bit, and now we're doing the Waiting for Next Year. So we'll talk about some sports, but I want to talk about Scene first. It's been, 3 years now?
Yeah, so we bought Scene along with a few other alt-weekly properties in December of 2013, so we're rolling into it's been over 3 years, rolling into our fourth year since we purchased the magazines and papers.
Well, and it's funny too, because I mean, how different has it been in actuality compared to what you thought it was going to be before you jumped into this whole thing? Did you have some preconceived notions? Were you at all prepared, or has it been just a trial by fire learning experience?
It's been a lot of that trial by fire. I think coming into it, we knew that the world of media was ever-changing, and especially the world of a print product and a print magazine, newspaper, which Scene is. And so the funniest thing, I think, was when people say to me, when I tell them I own Scene or, I work at Scene, they ask me, did you start it? I said, no, it's been around for almost 50 years. I definitely didn't start it. But I think that shows that the ever-changing landscape of media is. And so coming into it, we knew that there were quite a few challenges, right? So print publications in general across the board, except maybe now the New York Times and the Washington Post, or a few of those outliers, have been struggling for years. So the ad revenues are down. People aren't picking up print products as much as they used to. So we knew that there were these challenges coming into it, and we also saw that there were these opportunities we hoped to take advantage of. I think as time has gone on, we were right in predicting what areas we needed to go and try to take advantage of. There have been more challenges maybe in some areas than we anticipated, but it's kind of gone, as far as the trends go, how I thought it would be. Now, being in the media world and being at a publication, definitely didn't know what to expect from that, and that's been it's just ever changing and ever learning, I guess I'd say.
So the biggest thing that I always think about, because we run a cute little sports website, and so, but occasionally that means we make some people mad, and sometimes people hate us. But your business it's like a job requirement that you piss people off, and people are going to be mad at you. Like, were you at all prepared for that? I mean, obviously, I'm sure you can't name a bunch of names, but what's that been like over the last 3 years? Because your family really wasn't involved in putting targets on your back, and maybe you're still not, but there's a lot of negativity around covering people because you're putting light on things that they don't want light on.
Yeah, definitely. So we own Scene along with now four other papers. Originally, we bought Scene and three others. So the Detroit, San Antonio, and Orlando weeklies, and now we also own St. Louis. And our thoughts going into it was that we're never really going to get in trouble in those other markets, because whatever we end up writing in St. Louis or Detroit, I travel to those markets, I can meet people and know what's going on, but nobody is going to come up to me at a restaurant or an event or a game or something like that and say, how could you have written this about this? So we always knew that in Cleveland there would be a heightened sense of responsibility here. So I think it's been interesting, at times challenging, because you do get people that come to you and say, how could you write about this? Or we really thought we had good intentions here. Or, you're being too critical of this project or of this new restaurant that's opened up. And it is a challenge because, I can say, which is true, that I've never had a byline. I don't write anything on the site or in the paper, and most of the time I don't even know what we're covering or what the tenor and tone of that article is going to be. And I can use that, but my name is still in the paper and we still have ownership in it. So it's kind of a tough balance on, you don't want to make people mad. You don't want to alienate friends. You don't want to, cause relationships to sour. But at the same time, I feel that we have a duty and, an obligation to report things fairly and to criticize where there is the right place for it. So I think the thing that I've tried to stress is that, hopefully in our coverage of whether it's people or places or restaurants or whatever the case may be, is that we're coming from the right place on it. We're going to be fair. We're not going to take personal shots or digs where it's unnecessary, and that there is a need, especially now, especially in this media culture and city and world, I guess, to cover the stories that need to be covered. And if we aren't doing it, I don't know who is going to do it. So I kind of lean towards, that yes, we're going to make some people mad and unhappy, but if we're doing coverage the right way and being responsible about it, then I guess I'm okay with that if I feel like that it's coming from the right place.
Well, and the right place is something that's different for everybody. When you buy Scene or any of these other publications, you all of a sudden you own the 50 plus years of history and everything else. And I think Scene has been a very different paper at very different times with I think it's been mean-spirited at times. I think it's been insightful at times. I think it's been all over the map. So what was kind of your tone and your directive when you come in? I mean, there hasn't been a ton of turnover in the staff and the writers and everything. So, but I just wonder, kind of what your sensibilities were at the start and what they've kind of become over time.
Sure. And it's funny you brought that history thing up, and where, some people will say, did you start Scene? But I've had people come up to me. I can think of specific examples of people come up to me in public at bars and restaurants who are mad at me for something that was written in Scene in 2008. And I can tell them that we didn't own the paper at the time. I had nothing to do with it. A lot of times that writer may not even be there anymore.
And if you don't like him, you can say, but we would have written it anyway.
Right. And I have to kind of be put in a position where I have to stand by something that, or maybe go back and read it, right? I haven't read 50 years worth of archives of what Scene has written. So it is kind of a sticky spot there. But people, one of my favorite things to do over the time that we've owned the paper is you meet different people and you try to learn what their interaction is with Scene and what their experience is with it. So you meet people that tell you they like to pick it up to read what restaurant Doug Trattner's reviewing, or what concert is either coming to House of Blues or just happened at Beachland, a review.
For me, it was always grog shop listings, and if I read a couple articles, that was bonus. Like growing up, that was my relationship to Scene.
Yeah,
but it was like grog shop.
And I love to know why people continue to still pick it up or go to our website or follow us on social media. So because there was a time before the merger with Free Times when Scene really kind of had a niche of culture. So it was mostly music and then some arts and theater and food on the side. The changes had already been kind of coming with the merger of Free Times to move Scene into more, we're going to cover news, we're going to cover politics, along with all the cultural bent that we were covering back then. So I think what we've tried to do is just continue to emphasize those cultural pieces and then pick and choose on the news, the politics, and the sports where we see fit. So to cover music as much as we can, to cover theater, we noticed a couple years ago we weren't really covering visual art, so art galleries, art openings, what they're doing at the different museums. So we added that as a print piece. But to do those, to do food as best we can with openings, closings, reviews. And then, like I said, we're never going to be able to cover every press conference that Mayor Jackson has, or every city council meeting, or every crime that's committed in the streets, or every Indians game. But we can pick and choose, and where we see a fit, where our editorial team decides that they want to kind of get in there, we can cover those stories and focus on the ones that we think are important and relevant for our readers.
So even in the past 3 years and the 3 years prior to that, the world had just has changed from a publishing standpoint and everything else. Where do you see things going in terms of, you've got a website, mm-hmm. and then you've got all these other channels between Facebook and Twitter, and and one thing that I've learned since getting to know you guys is that Scene is almost as much of an events company as they are a publisher, but I just wonder, with all these different channels and seeing the way the TV channels do it and the local paper does it and how everybody, what's your thought on how to attack these things and live video on Facebook and all these other things? Is it a difficult thing Does it keep you up at night, or is it just something that you take it day by day to attack all those different channels?
Yeah, and I think you have to take it day by day because you don't. It's so hard to predict what's coming next, right? So for a while now, Facebook is the traffic generator, right? So it's pretty much your web traffic. A lot of it is determined by your Facebook reach and how well your posts are doing, and that's who sees your post and that's who clicks on it. But who would have known that they would have changed their algorithm? So Facebook Live would be the thing that's drawing eyeballs, or how they look at it. And if I don't have a journalism background, but it's kind of, I was thinking about this kind of leading into this conversation. It's a weird type of industry where the better the journalism is. So if we break a really good story or find out some news that nobody knows on or have really good food reviews, it doesn't necessarily at all translate into the business doing well or the paper doing well. And there are some exceptions, like I said, the New York Times, the Washington Post, that are, kind of keeping up with what's going on around the country. But for the most part, it doesn't really translate into, we write a great story and the paper's going to do really well. Now the editorial reputation does well and people pick it up and maybe view it more, but it doesn't translate into added sales dollars necessarily, or digital dollars or events. So it's kind of a weird thing where, I could feel like we're doing the best job we can editorially and it doesn't translate. And so, there's some thought behind, does it make, if you are putting out an editorial product, should those be nonprofits or otherwise driven? Because it doesn't really kind of translate across the board to making money off just having strong editorial. So as you mentioned, we kind of identified coming in that we can't just be that print product because print ad dollars, look anywhere pretty much, and you'll see a reduction. You see the point dealer printing fewer copies and home delivering on only a few days a week, or different publications have either closed or merged or stopped their print products. So I don't think we're creative enough to kind of stem the tide there. Now, what I will say is, and this was the case when we bought it and still the case, is even though there are fewer copies printed than there were 10 years ago, the pickup rate every week is still 97 or 98%. So there's still a lot of demand for that print product, which as long as that continues, and we love to see that coming in, we know that we want to still print the paper. But the revenues on that side just aren't going to increase, and they may continue to fall. So we identified coming in that we needed to look for other streams. So that would be the digital revenue that we have on our website, as well as using some of our social media and other agency type services to try to go and branch out to have some other ways to approach local businesses. And the other one, like you mentioned, is the events space. And so what I always say to people is, if you were to come in to this industry brand new, you definitely wouldn't start a newspaper or magazine print product, because that would be crazy. And how do you even sell the ads and get the distribution going and make it worth the while to even print it? If you started a website, you could do that, but without having the sales team and the promotion and the editorial team, you need to put content. As you know, there's a lot of different things that you need to do. And then the events company, same thing, right? So if you start a brand new events company without the established website, social media feeds, promotional feeds, employees, even some of the contacts we have in the food and drink and venue world, you'd have a tougher time. So where we felt like we had an advantage was we already have the print product. We already have the social media feeds that people are following to find out what's going on. We have the website. So, and we have these relationships with, may they be advertisers or venues. So the natural transition was, let's do these events. So when we bought Scene, I think there were 3 or 4 events per year. They had kind of gone back and forth to the Music Fest, but there was the Ale Fest, which is the beer drinking event. There was Flavor, which is a food event, and maybe one other at the time. And we viewed that as the biggest opportunity because we know we have a following. We know we have people that follow us and read us. And so we wanted to kind of take that to the next level and throw them, who doesn't like to go to great parties that center around either food or music or alcohol or a combination of all the above.
Or pig and whiskey.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, barbecue
which
and booze.
Which is in Willoughby.
Yeah, barbecue and booze.
And you've taken it all over the city.
Yeah. So that's been the biggest change over these past 3 years is we are now up to an event, I'd say, every 6 weeks or so, and those can be small to medium to large size festivals. And like you said, last year we did a festival in Public Square, an Oktoberfest. We did Pig and Whiskey and the Rib Burn-Off in Willoughby. We did beer gardens in Van Aken and Shaker. So we're taking them to different areas and trying to leverage the relationships we have with the beer distributors and the liquor distributors and the restaurants to try to throw these events. And the weirdest thing is that in a lot of ways, the event and the revenues we make and the event successes are subsidizing the journalism that we like to do. And which is such a weird relationship.
Which is what I was going to say is like if you're an accountant and you come in and you do a business case of this thing, you might look at the journalism and say there's no ROI, but you and I both sit here and know that like Eric or Sam digging in for 100+ hours on a story and writing it like crazy for another 50 hours and creating this cover story that like there is no like the carrot is not dangling in front in the digital world because we're tuned into clicks and hits and all this other stuff, but seen isn't seen without those stories. Right. And so like it's really hard sometimes to remember what is providing the value versus the kick in the hits online.
Yeah, absolutely. And so people go to our website and they pick the paper up and they follow us on social media because maybe they want to read, maybe they want to go through the slideshow of the 25 new restaurants opening, but also because they are very interested in the political coverage or the news coverage that we're doing. And so you're right, and it can be frustrating for the writers, absolutely, as they know that they could spend hours and hours on a specific story that's very important.
But if they would have just gone to the burlesque show at the Beachland and taken 25 photos.
Yes, absolutely. And so, but they know that, they take pride in the work that they do. And a lot of times, not a lot of times, but sometimes you will see something happen based on it. An investigation will start. A lot of the Flint water crisis coverage that really led to some of the changes and the noticing of it was done by a former editor of Metro Times, which is our Detroit paper in Detroit. And he won journalism prizes based on it. And we've had similar instances here in Cleveland of specific coverage that has led to huge changes, people getting out of jail, lawsuits being filed, so there are those times where you can feel at least rewarded by that, even though it's not getting as many page views as Khloe Kardashian, Tristan Thompson story or something like that.
Well, and speaking of slideshows, I've always told Vince that the thing, like slideshows are a punchline, but not if they're actually events in Cleveland that we didn't go to. They're only a punchline if you're pulling 25 AP photos to like joke around about something a la BuzzFeed. So I will stand behind, and nobody's asking me to, but I'll stand behind the scene photo things because it's usually an event that I could have gone to that I didn't go to.
Right.
Or if I did go, I want to see like which photos were picked out to hopefully avoid any embarrassing ones of myself.
Yeah, so. and we can make, but I look through them, and pretty much anybody you talk to, right? If you attend an event, you look through them. If you're interested in what's going on this weekend, you look through them. And so the thing that I think Scene was in a good position, and so are these other alt weeklies, is they are and continue to be hyper local, and so. No matter what else is going on and all these other distractions and, there's other things to listen to and to watch and, you're cutting the cord and finding different and listening to podcasts. And there's always going to be an interest in what's going on in and around your city, right? You always want to find that new restaurant opening up. You want to know who's playing at the different concert venues. You want to know what show's coming into Playhouse Square, and it's different things for different people, but I don't see that changing. So the interest in the local piece of it is kind of where, we have always seen as our fit and continue to see it.
When I think there was a time where you thought that the national people were going to try and steal the local away, and I think I heard Bill Simmons talking about this as part of the ESPN layoff conversation. Mm-hmm. ESPN even thought that they were going to replace like Cleveland.com's sports beat writers. Right. And now there's this realization that with the giant national platform, you don't want to try and beat out the local paper too. That might not be the best part of the business, but I'm guilty. I once thought local was probably going away. It was going to be conglomerated into whoever had the largest platform, but it's got to feel pretty good to you, somebody who's invested locally around the country, and I know the Cleveland people own all these others, but right. they're still hyper local, and all the editors are there. You haven't consolidated editorial, up on high in Cleveland.
No. So we have an office in each market, and we have 15 or 20 people working in each market, and there's small staffs and small editorial staffs. You're talking.
So they're nimble.
Yes. So 5, 6, 7, 8 people at the most, maybe in our different markets, but they're nimble. They're able to cover a variety of events. They're able to be there to pick and choose which ones they have the most interest in, whatever that may be. And like you said, they have the contacts, they have the knowledge. And so if there's something happening here in Cleveland and it has to do with city council, Sam Allard is going to be on top of that because he knows those city council people, and he can find out what they're thinking on a specific issue or what's going on. And if somebody were to come in or try to report this from afar, they would have a tougher time. I think even when the Republican National Convention was here, we had some really good, interesting, unique stories because of the people we were talking to or the angles we had or the coverage we had on it. And even though you had all these journalists coming in from all over the world, we were able to cover it in a specific way that because of our knowledge of Cleveland that maybe some of the others couldn't. And that's where, we hope to be able to continue to do that, is to take advantage of those markets that we're in, and be, we're located downtown, so we're 5 to 10 minutes away from any type of major event, game, press conference, meeting that happens, and be there and be able to report on it, almost immediately.
So another big part of kind of your personal life is sports, and maybe I'm talking about the pre-kid version of you before you had children, but very few people who don't play in the games have been to more sporting events than you in the last 5 years. So I do want to talk about all of our sports teams. Let's take the Browns first, because they're the worst out of all three. Of all the teams that I see you talk about, you don't seem to have as much of a relationship with them at all. Is that recent, or have you always been like a Browns third kind of a guy?
I'd say I've always been a Browns third. I think that's more the nature of my age. And so I'm 34 years old, and while some of my friends will tell me that they remember the late 80s teams, I don't remember them. So for pretty much my life that I can remember, the Browns have been brutal or gone, or decent in a few of those 90s years, and then 1 or 2 since they've been back. So my fandom, I think, has become less and less because of the struggles of the franchise, and I also have become so disenfranchised by the way that the NFL has acted in a variety of ways, and then specifically the health issue, so the concussion issue. And so it has been harder and harder for me to be a Browns fan and an NFL fan, knowing what I know about how the league treats its players, how the league treats its retired players, how the league operates, both in the health and then now even, moving teams across, I think it's crazy that Oakland isn't going to have
4 teams in the last 18 months.
Yeah, now? Which they can position it as any way, but it's not good when you're pulling teams away from markets. And when a city like Oakland, which to me extremely loyal fan base, and they lose the team, or again, we have a paper in St. Louis, and the way that whole thing went down was awful. They're still paying on the stadium that is no longer being used by the Rams, and so I'd say a combination of factors. Now, if the Browns were a lot better, I probably would be paying attention more, but it may be at the point now where, because of the Browns being so bad for so long and because of my other issues with the league, where, I mean, last year I didn't go to a game. I think the year before I maybe went to one. And so I just have lost interest. And I think maybe it's talked about some, but I think it's not even talked about enough how much, taking away even the health and the NFL issues, the Browns of not being good for this long, how much they've lost generations of fans, I think is underrated and not talked about as much when you just in Cleveland.
Well, and it's one thing to just be bad, but the level of dysfunction that has gone on in Berea, the things that got reported, the things that didn't get reported, the level is like exceptional.
Yes.
Exceptional in a bad way. And so I'm with you. It's a really hard sell. I think I'm kind of lying to myself, though. I think if they were as good as the Patriots, I wouldn't care about any of that stuff.
Right. It's easier to say you're not a fan when they're winning 1 or 2 games and
I
they're
might
the
gloss
laughing
over
stock of the league.
I might gloss over all that NFL stuff too if the Browns were good. I mean, I certainly had lots of complaints about the NBA at large when LeBron was gone. Now we've got a super team. And so I put up with it, but I still, in my heart, I do think super teams are kind of bad for the NBA.
I do too, and I think we're seeing it in this year's playoffs. Right? There's been, I don't know, 1 or 2 games that have been decided by fewer than 10 points. The games have been awful, and I'm someone that usually would stay up and watch the late games. I'd watch as many of the playoff games as I could, even when the Cavs aren't playing or aren't even involved. But these games have been mostly hard to watch because of the lack of competitiveness. You have the Warriors winning every game by 10 or 15 points. The same. Obviously, I'm watching the Cavs games and I'm enjoying them winning.
Yeah.
But when you have so many superstars on 2 or 3 teams, and you can say, yeah, I'm sure the finals will be great, which they should be amazing. And assuming, I think everybody is pretty sure it'll be the Cavaliers and the Warriors, and, unless something drastic happens in the next week. But otherwise, when the buildup isn't as good and you don't have earlier series and it's kind of preordained, I think there is some interest lost prior to that. And if I was a fan of another team, I'd probably also say, they have all these superstars and, we don't really, even making the playoffs, we don't have a shot at, I'm thinking of these Jazz fans and they're down, they're great fans, but they're down 2-0. And do they even think they had a chance of winning a game, let alone beating the Warriors in a playoff series?
And we're not even talking about Philly.
Right.
You wake up this morning in Toronto and you have a pretty good basketball team that just got swept. Like, what do you do?
Yeah.
What do you do as a fan? What do you do as an organization? And that leads everybody to tear it down and hope that they can, hit a lottery ticket at some point, or just try and wait till LeBron is 42 and he's done. But it's a difficult thing. I always thought about that. When LeBron went to Miami with the rest of the Heat, the rest of the superstars, it was like, and then they won. It was like, okay, so you did what you were supposed to do. You went and proved that you can do what you're supposed to do. And same with LeBron last year.
Right.
It was one of the greatest moments of my life, but it's also, if I'm being honest on the outside, he proved that he could recruit the best players and win the whole thing.
Yeah, and there's like these trends that happen in the league that I don't know what the NBA can do about them, but I think in the long run, it makes the product a little worse. I mean, I like even the way the game is played, I understand completely why it makes sense to just shoot threes and go for layups and dunks, because if you look at the stats behind it, it makes complete sense. There are some games where I think it's not as entertaining as some of the games. Now, I don't want to go back to the Knicks Heat mid-'90s, but I think about the time LeBron was here first, it did seem to be a little harder. Go back to the Cavs Pistons series or something. It seemed a little bit more difficult to score. You didn't have 8 guys on the court shooting 3-pointers. I mean, even look at like the most talked about thing this year was the MVP debate. Harden versus Westbrook. But when you watch some of those Oklahoma City Houston games, I think they're tough to watch. When you watch Harden flailing around on screens and trying to get fouls, and Westbrook shooting it 30 times, and I don't know that that's that's great basketball aesthetically.
And there's so many parallels. It's like when they say that women's tennis is better because they get into some rallies, and men's tennis, it's all about that serve and getting aces.
Right.
And in baseball, you've got the shift. So in some ways, it's almost like we got too smart.
Yes.
For our own entertainment good.
Right. So I'm not going to tell the franchises that they shouldn't do these things because they make the most sense when you're doing it. But there were some of the games in that Grizzlies-Spurs series that were better than anything because the teams were playing well, and it was kind of back and forth type basketball, and it wasn't one-on-one. And so there are these trends that are, right, like you said, that make sense, that are smart, that are the right way to go. But when it's just, you're watching the Cavs and it's one guy in the middle and then three guys standing outside, and it's like, you can almost get to a point where it goes too far that way. And sure, you want your team to win and you want to win the title, but it's like, where does it stop? And, when does the basketball not get as appealing to watch? Because it's just everybody sits in the corner and shoots threes, and that's kind of
and
style.
we've seen that in the NFL too, where, they've got this kind of rule creep, where I was trying to explain this to somebody all last year. I have a 7-year-old now. He was 6 last year. Trying to explain to him what a catch is.
Yes.
Well, 2 feet in bounds. Did the ball move before, he touched? And it's like we've got attorneys deciding the rules of these games.
Right.
And it just, at a certain point, it makes less sense. And I think there's a generation of fans that are going to be lost, or maybe it allows like esports. Maybe that's part of the fuel that has allowed esports, because it's all electronically defined, and there are no technicalities.
Right. Yeah. And I think that you watch that game, and that game has changed so much too, that it's, it's so much about kind of the vertical passing game, and it's so much more high scoring, and it's pretty much like quarterback is, it's always been that way, but it was not as much this way 15 or 20 years ago. And it's continued to change where it's almost impossible to stop a good passing attack. And so that game it's almost similar to it in that it's continued to change that way. But right, it's hard when you're watching these games to explain these things, or to kind of keep up with those trends that continue to happen.
Eventually it's going to make baseball seem simple, because baseball once was I don't know if I can explain this try and explain baseball to somebody who understands cricket,
right?
At
least until though, with the commissioner now, with these changes, the intentional walk change, which is just, to me, the stupidest. Like, of all the things that take time in a game, it's 20 seconds of 4 balls. I've never heard somebody complain this intentional walk took too long. No. Meanwhile, the games are taking 3 hours longer this season, I think it seems like, than in the past few years, because pitchers are taking longer, batters are stepping out more, they're taking more pitches, and all these other things that have nothing to do with an intentional walk. And now they're trying to come up with other ways to.
Well, because advanced metrics reward you for taking more pitches,
right,
and tiring out starters and all this other stuff. And to a certain extent, that you just can't make enough changes. And the one thing that drives me more crazy than anything else is when I can see what the unintended consequences are going to be.
Right.
And they can't.
Yes.
Like the kickoff thing has now given incentive to like chip shot.
Right. To make it so that the guy has to catch it at the 6-yard line, and then he probably has more of an injury risk because he has guys running at him like crazy, expecting it to be at the 5, and then they can stop him before where they come out. Or, I don't know, I never heard people clamoring that there were too many extra points being made, and now it's turned into like a different play where games are being decided by 1 point and guys are missing extra. I don't know. That never seemed to be a major issue to me, was that too many guys were making
I don't
extra
remember
points.
Anybody clamoring for a harder extra point.
No, so you're creating.
There's another out-of-touch rule change by a bunch of billionaire jerks who moved teams, and if the Browns were good, I wouldn't care about any of it.
Yeah, you're creating solutions. But yeah, I don't know. It's just it's interesting to see because you have so many rule changes and trends happening that are changing the games that we've watched for so long.
All right, last but not least, because the Indians are kind of your main thing, the one topic that I think is really interesting to talk about with you is trying to watch and root for Trevor Bauer. You've got a very contentious. You've been blocked by him now, right?
Yeah, I was blocked by him.
Okay, because you called out his politics.
Right. So he originally, I think, prior to the season starting, there was he got a news alert on his phone from the Apple News and Moments, and I think it was something about Trump's approval rating, and it was around the time of the immigration and travel issues. And I think Bauer was mad that the mainstream media, I think he called it, was criticizing him, was giving him a low grade, was talking about these travel bans, and Bauer did this tweet about the media being biased. And so I noticed it. A lot of people were tweeting back at Bauer, and I think I just said to him, "What grade would you give Trump, or what do you think about how he's doing? Do you think everybody who's criticizing him is wrong?" And I think Bauer responded saying he thought he got an A or something like that. and I said, "What do you think?" I think we went back and forth a couple of times. What do you think about the ban and the judge's rulings on it? And then we kind of got to a point where the thing that I think drew a lot of attention to it was when I said to him, what do you think the rest of your teammates would think about this policy in particular, not especially Trump? And Bauer came back to me and said, a lot of my teammates support Trump. And I don't know what any of their political viewpoints are. I would have to assume that at least some of them probably, if they didn't vote for him, they definitely don't support him. Maybe they didn't vote for anybody, but that not all of his teammates support Trump. I know by nature baseball players are a little more conservative politically than others, but there are still a lot of people in that locker room that I doubt supported Trump. And so when he said that to me, I kind of thought, this is not a good idea by him, because whether or not his teammates support Trump, they don't want him putting any of their political viewpoints. That's their
message to send if they feel like it.
Whoever they support.
Yeah.
And so when he said to me that a lot of his teammates support Trump, I think then a lot of other people saw the interaction.
Then everybody's like speculating, well, is it Kluber? Is it and you start guessing.
Who else supports him?
And who's chatting up Bauer about their love of Donald Trump? And which is okay or whatever, but we're all trying, I think most of us are trying to keep those worlds separated, because honestly, I don't care. I don't want to have to care what Bauer thinks about politics, because I just want him to be a pitcher. Mm-hmm. And he's entitled to speak his message however he wants.
Yeah, absolutely.
But not everybody else's message.
Right. And then what happened was Dan Otero's wife responded to him and said, had a story of a refugee story about, I think it was his grandmother or somebody that came over to the country, and the fact that they did not support Trump.
Right.
And so they started that conversation, like, not every one of my teammates supports him. And then we went back and forth a couple more times about that. And then we started talking about Obama. And I think he referenced, so we talked, the summary of it was that we kind of went, whether some of Trump's policies were race-based. And I said, what do you think about the fact that he kind of always said that Obama wasn't born here? And when I asked Trevor Bauer that question is when he blocked me without responding to it. And my biggest issue of the whole thing was the teammate thing. But again, that's not me. That's his teammates. Right. This is a week before spring training also. But my biggest issue was, you can say what you want. You can have whatever political viewpoints you want to have. But I didn't call him a name. I didn't criticize his pitching. I didn't say don't speak. I just was in a conversation with him, and he blocked me for asking him a question. And so to me, it's like, you can have and say what you want, but where you block me and then block others, and I went back and looked, and he's blocking other people, and he's deleting tweets, and he's telling he's saying some really awful things to some fans of the team, which I'm sure the organization isn't thrilled about. And, I just think if you're going to have these viewpoints, stand up for them. Don't critique people individually. Don't block people. Be responsible about it. And that's where I thought he went over the edge. And as others have pointed out, over the last month, take away his on the field performance, he really has not been on social media much at all, interacting.
They had to have had a talk with him.
I think somebody probably got to him.
Because regardless, if you handle yourself like that, even if I handled myself like that,
right?
I'd be public enemy number one in my small circle, and he's in a very big circle.
Yes, absolutely. Where I thought you were going with it was Chief Wahoo.
No,
and I have one thing to say about that because it's kind of ties into sports, and then some of the questions you were asking earlier is one of the major criticisms we get at Scene, and even some people have said to me is, fans of the teams aren't the ones calling for this. So what I'd like to tell people is because we've had this issue come up recently, both with Chief Wahoo and then the Q renovation project,
right,
which our writers have been very critical of. And I think it ties both these conversations in because, as you mentioned before, I attend both teams' games. We're season ticket holders of the Cavaliers and the Indians. Mm-hmm. And so when our writers are coming for it, where I'm coming from it is of a place of supporting these organizations, putting our money towards it, attending these games. So we're not, and I'm not specifically coming at a place where I hate these teams. I don't think sports are important. I don't like going to games. And so it's like coming out of a place of support for them where, our editorial and sometimes I have individual issues with these things. So I wanted to make that point because it's like, it's not that I'm dividing that. It's that I do love these teams, but still can be critical of some of the decisions they make.
Yes. Well, and we're out of time. We've got some people trying to come into the room here, but and we'll pick it up some other time. We'll do it again. But I'm happy that you were able to make it onto the WFNY podcast, and hopefully you'll do it again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Craig.
All right. Well, until next time, everybody, it's been the waitingfornextyear.com podcast.